Services are a core function of servers. It has the term server practically in it. So services are important. We have to be aware of services. Services are basically programs and processes that run in the background. So it runs behind the scenes. It's something that users don't interact with on a desktop, but they provide services on the network. For example, your web service is a service, DNS is a service, DHCP is a service. Most of the things we talk about and learn about in this course after this week are going to be services. We configure them with maybe graphical user interfaces. Users may have graphical user interfaces to interact with certain services, but at their core, they run in the background. They run as services in the background. With services, you may need to start them. You may need to stop them. You might have to restart them or pause them, resume them if they're already paused, or copy to paste information about a service, say, to a text file. All right, so when you go into the Server Manager, you'll be able to see all of the services that are running in the Service Manager. So there is a commandlet, or I'm sorry, an MMC for showing services that almost all servers have. You can also do this from the PowerShell. You can view services, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But here you can see a list of services. You can also see the status. So we see that some of them are running, some of them are stopped. You can see the start type. So a manual start type means that you have to start that service after the service starts. But an automatic type means that it will automatically start when the service is started up. Disabled means that the service cannot be started. You have to convert the service to either manual or automatic in order to start a disabled service. So this is where you go to manage services, and of course you can right-click them and look at properties as well. So the services MMC is available from the Tools menu in the Server Manager. So the services Snapin is a standard part of computer management MMC. You can use the services Snapin to set the service startup type, which I just talked about, set the service logon. So services use a certain account in many cases when they run, so they have the permissions of a certain account when they're running in the background. You can set the recovery options, which basically means when a service stops or crashes, you can tell the server what to do about that. So you can tell it to restart the service, for example, and you can tell it how many times to try that. You can tell it to do it forever. Every time the service crashes, try to start it again, which is important. It's good for availability. You can look at dependencies. So some services require other services to be running in order to use those services. So you can view what those dependencies are. In other words, services will not start unless a service that they depend on is also running. So sometimes it's helpful to see what those dependencies are so you can troubleshoot things. Now, if you're going to be managing services from the PowerShell, you can use the get service command to display a list of all the services. You can use the start service command to start a service, the stop service command to stop a service, obviously, and then there's restart, suspend, and resume, which is like pause in the UI, if you see that in the Snapin or the MMC. And you can also set service, which changes the properties of the service. For example, that would change the logon for the service, or you can use that command to change whether it's automatic, manual, or disabled, for example. New service can be used to create a new service, so you can bind an executable as a service. That does not always work, I should caution you. You can't just run that command to make any executable service. It has to be an executable that can be run as a service, and in many cases, you have to use other tools to do that. So most applications that run as a service, they'll either have a utility to install the service itself. For example, with .NET services, you have to use the .NET command to install services. So that command, again, will not always work, but it is one of the commands that are available to you. All right, so that's a little bit about services. In the next slide deck, we'll talk about NIC teaming.